Right. Today we are going to unpack psychological safety. For those of you who have not met me before, my name is David King, and I am a learning and development activist. And I'm really intrigued and fascinated by this topic. And I'm sure it's a concept that you have come across before. It's very much a topic that is spoken about in most organizations. It's not necessarily actioned properly. I think the term is thrown around, but I don't really believe at this stage we've matured enough to really tackle it and to be brave and bold. So this is for me a lovely opportunity for us to share, and I really would like you to engage. And if you wish to, if you've got any questions, I'm going to really encourage you to ask them and to pop stuff in the chat that I'll check periodically. But yeah, let's get going. The beauty of this topic too, once again, it is evidence-based research. It's not just based on feelings and emotions. It is content that is science-led. And those of you who have attended one of my seminars before or webinars before, I'm a great believer in tackling both head and heart. So we need to, generally, we are either head people or heart people. So we either like facts or feelings. But it's very important that we cover both so that everybody feels connected with the content. And it's necessary in a world to understand both spaces. Even though we may lean towards one or the other, I think it's vitally important that we become more comfortable with the space that maybe is not our second nature. So up first is a slide of two of my favorite people in the world. I have a list, but these two stand out, and I thought this picture really jumped out at me and leaned into our topic, because both these gentlemen are very different, and they both contributed in different ways to the world. I think we all very familiar with, most of us should be familiar with Desmond Tutu and with Richard Branson. And for me, they are people that I respect for different reasons. They're both controversial characters. I think I enjoy controversial people. Richard Branson, I think I respect him because of his tenacity in doing something that he's passionate about, and he's never been concerned about naysayers and people who tell him that he can't. And if any of you read any of his books, his story is really, I mean, he's battled as a child. He battled with dyslexia, and always wanted to challenge the status quo. And I think that's why I really enjoy him. And then Desmond Tutu, I think for a spiritual leader for me, someone who is not scared to speak out. He was never concerned about what other people thought. He was very in touch with his feelings. He was very compassionate, very empathetic. But as I said, he never was afraid of speaking his mind. And why I bring this photograph up again is that when I am in a place where I'm battling to challenge the status quo, or I feel that I cannot speak up in an environment, I think of these two individuals, and they give me the courage to make a stand. And to me, it's a lovely segue into talking about psychological safety, because we are going to obviously unpack the definition and what it entails and how it affects us as individuals, and then also if we lead other people. So if we in a business environment where people report into us, so I'm going to ask you to wear two hats today. One as an individual and one as somebody in which somebody reports into you. Please, I always like to introduce this to remind us to use the chat function when we're doing virtual there's a tendency to not partake, not to contribute. If we were sitting in a live session, the engagement is always far better. So as the slide shows, please, if you want to contribute, if you've got something to say, don't hold back. And that's part of what we're learning today in psychological safety. Just type a message. Don't worry about the grammar. Don't worry about what other people are going to think. If you've got something on your mind, pop it in the chat function, or put up your hand and we can unmute you. So I think it's very important today for us also to be curious. It's a lovely word, and I like to talk about it a lot. It's something that we need to do more of. And instead of fearing stuff or not understanding stuff, we need to go and explore. And I think that's where curiosity is a wonderful concept, because we tend to remember, as human beings, we're hardwired. Our brains are hardwired to see the worst case scenario, and we have to work much harder at not. So instead of seeing something as a threat, let us try and just shift the language and go and explore and be curious. So instead of shutting something down or rejecting something or ignoring something or not refusing to partake in something, rather say, let me go and explore and investigate to see where this takes me, rather than a not. So before we even start with the definition of what psychological safety is, I really want us to just briefly touch on the imposter syndrome. So that's another very interesting concept. And why I like to raise this one again is because this is something I felt for many, many, many years that I was the only person suffering from it until I discovered the science behind imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome, and it's beautifully explained in this slide, is that you always feel in some way that you're going to get caught out. That I had this feeling that I'm going to be sitting in a meeting or sitting at my desk and work, and someone's going to walk up to me one day and say, I've caught you out. We finally discovered that you aren't actually effective in what you do. And that is what imposter syndrome is. And you know what? The science behind it is that 95% of us suffer from imposter syndrome. It exists. So, and particularly when we're not feeling so good about ourselves, and where we're doubting our capacity or our efficiency, or we've been disciplined in some way, or told that our job is not as effective, or the work we've produced, we have this tendency to think, gee, maybe I'm not really as good as what I think I am, or maybe other people are better than me. So this is why I think it's very powerful to raise this, and to share this information with others. So to share this with your children, to share this with your partners, to share this with your friends, with your work colleagues, with those that report into you, because it's there and exists. And instead of not talking about the stuff, we need to raise it. So imposter syndrome is a feeling of that I'm fake, I'm going to be caught out, I'm not really smart enough to do this job, I'm potentially going to fail. And very importantly, which is the segue into psychological safety, no one would actually listen to me. No one can really listen to me, because how much do I really know? I can't really be an expert in what I do. Where we need to shift the language into self-compassion. So it's that whole growth mindset. So we should be saying, instead of I can't do it, that this is new to me and I'm learning, or I have made a mistake. I am not a mistake. I made a mistake. I'm still learning. And my opinions are actually useful and valid. Even if somebody else doesn't agree, I am entitled to share my opinions and share my viewpoint, and not to be shut down. So at the bottom there, it says, tough thoughts are normal. They're often a form of self-protection, but don't let them call the shots on who you are and how you live. And the psychologist Susan David, if you haven't come across her before, you need to go and check her out. She is based in the US, but she is South African, and she does a lovely, amazing, interesting research on this topic around imposter syndrome and self-compassion and feelings and emotions. But I thought it was good to set the scene here, and I really would like you to pop in the chat or even to put up your hand if this is something that you can relate to, or if you want to ask me any questions around imposter syndrome. I'm ready and waiting before we actually move on to psychological safety. So I'm just going to check if anybody wants to pop in a question around imposter syndrome. And I hope I explained it efficiently and effectively. Good, thank you. You can relate. Cool. So now let us head into the topic of the day, which is psychological safety. And this question I'm going to ask you is, why is psychological and safety important to me? And I'd love you to just pop what you think the answer is to that question. Why is this concept of psychological safety important to me personally? That's you. Cool. Mental well-being, exactly. So as we're going to discover a direct link to my mental wellness and my mental well-being, and as that image, as you can see that image on the screen, also clearly depicts where we are heading. Thank you, Samaya. Absolutely, Celeste, fix all parts of our lives. Absolutely, but when it comes to decision making, burnout, creativity, there's amazing science around an environment where there's no psychological safety, then creativity or innovation doesn't actually exist. And very importantly, Megan, around this fear of reprisal. And that's, as human beings, that's often the one thing that holds us back, is the fear of what if and what will happen. Thank you. Acknowledgement and acceptance of yourself. So important. So, as I said earlier, it's so vitally important that when we are enlightened and we receive information that is helpful, or it's an aha moment, and hopefully you will have a few aha moments during the session, that we pass this information on. It's important because psychological shames our realities sometimes and affects the relationships we have. Absolutely. Contentment at work, spot on. Thank you for all your contributions. So you will now see a list of 12 questions on your screen. I want you to read through each of those questions, and I want you to pop in the chat box how many of them you can relate to. So there's 12 of them. Look at them and then pop in a number in the chat box as to how many you can relate to or have experienced. Because hopefully this might be your aha moment. Because now we're getting into the detail of why we're actually having this discussing this topic today. And I want you to take into account your entire life. So your home life, your social settings, your work life. Thank you. We've got 10s, we've got 6s, we've got 6s, 8, yeah, wow, 10, absolutely, 7, 9, 5, 8, 12. Sorry about that. Flip 12. So I hope you realize the severity of something that we go through that we shouldn't have to go through. 12, 8, 6, 8. So as you can see, we're leaning towards the high number, 9. And when I saw these questions, I had an aha moment as to how impactful psychological safety is. And we can really, I mean, we could spend a whole day unpacking this topic. And there's so many other components to it. So today is definitely an intro, a high level. There's a direct link to diversity and inclusion and equity, because generally, thank you, Susan, 529. Excuse me, generally with diversity and inclusion, what's happened in the South African context generally is that white males dominate in the boardroom and in the meeting rooms, and don't tend to have been affected as much as anyone that's not a white male in South Africa. So from our diversity and inclusion training, that is something that gets tackled up front. It's not only about awareness, it's also about action. So how do you change it? Which is maybe another topic we can hook into at another stage. Cool. Thank you everybody for sharing. Thanks, Belinda. So when you look at those questions, I think you suddenly realize, Flip, I may have got to a stage where this was potentially quite normal, that I'm used to this. It's part of what I'm supposed to expect in the world of work, when actually it's not. And this is the great pushback, the great fight back that we need to be part of, to raise awareness around topics like this and to challenge our environment and our cultures in organizations where this happens, because it's not acceptable. It has to be targeted, and it needs to be challenged. So I am hoping that you will be able to hear my video.
There was research last year that was written up in the New York Times at Google saying that Google did a massive 4-year study to find out what differentiated great teams from not so great teams. And bottom line, they found that the biggest differentiator by far of excellent teams at Google and not so good teams was psychological safety. And that was stunning news to me. I mean, it was music to my ears, of course. But the reason why I think that's very important news for people in any organization is that I, at least, had a tendency to think of Google as full of unbelievably smart people, which I think is absolutely the case, but people who wouldn't necessarily have a problem sharing what they're thinking, that there would be just uniformly a high level of confidence that I can say what I'm thinking. But it turns out, no, even at Google, it varied greatly from team to team, and that made all the difference. We live more and more in a knowledge economy. That is, it is the knowledge, the ideas that people have, that people bring, that organizations bring, that really add value in the marketplace. So it stands to reason that we need to hear from people. And yet, the research, the data are overwhelming that many people feel they can't speak up at work. In many companies, it might be as many as half the employees are reporting that it really doesn't feel safe to speak up. That means we're losing enormous value. Right? So if we aren't hearing from people, we may be missing out on a game-changing idea, that could become part of a new product or a new service. Or we might miss an early warning of a threat in the market that someone saw but felt unable to bring the bad news to their boss. It can be very powerful when a leader apologizes for not having made it safe in the past. When a leader takes responsibility and acknowledges, I can see that there were things that I did that made it difficult for you to come to me. Rather than, I think there's a spontaneous tendency to say, well, why didn't you come to me? Rather than stopping to think, I wonder what I did that made it difficult for you to come to me. Because I will assume that you are well-intentioned, right? I also assume that you're smart. So if it didn't work out, if there wasn't psychological safety there, it's on me. And I think it's always on the leader to go first and to do what he or she can to create psychological safety. The ability for people to come to work and speak up about what they know, what they don't know, what they see, what they're worried about is absolutely mission critical to success in a knowledge economy.
Right. I'm going to need to just share my screen again. So in that clip, it's Amy Edmondson. I'm sure some of you may have come across her already. I found she definitely is a influencer in this space and has done a lot of research, which was initiated with that research that was done at Google. And the essence of what she was saying there around how people are not speaking up and not sharing. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that, because you're going to be shunned, you're going to be put down, you might even be blamed, or someone might even take your idea. And then secondly, her very important focus point was around the leader. So it's the leader's responsibility in a meeting, in a gathering, to create that space. Otherwise, people are not going to come forward. I clearly remember having meetings where I did not participate for fear of being shut down or being told that my content wasn't, or my comment wasn't valid. I clearly remember being in meetings where nobody spoke. That's always to me a telltale sign when nobody speaks and the leader says no one's contributing, or they will leave the meeting and go and talk to another colleague and saying my team are not participating. No one comes up with any ideas or any solutions. And that's what Amy was talking about. You need to look at yourself and you need to say, you as a leader have not created that space. The challenge is, as a member of a meeting or a team where your line manager is not acknowledging that about him or herself. That's always in life, in a work environment, that's the challenge, because there's upward management that needs to then to take place. I'm going to share my screen again. So let's get down to the definition. What is it? Okay, so if you Google it, you're going to come across many, many definitions. And I've just pulled two elements that I felt made a lot of sense. So psychological safety is a shared belief that it's safe to take interpersonal risks as a group. It's a shared belief held by members of a team that others on the team, including the leader, will not embarrass, reject, or punish them for speaking up. How's that? Very clearly and succinctly put. So you want to be part of a team where you're allowed to be you're allowed to share, you're not going to be shut down, you're not going to be made to feel stupid. And whose responsibility is it if you're in charge is you as the leader. So there's 4 stages of psychological safety. The first one is what's called, this is for our head or facts individuals in the session today. The first one is the inclusion safety. The word inclusion obviously means all, allowing everyone to be part of. So inclusion safety satisfies a very basic human need, which is actually to connect and belong. That's what we, as human beings, as much as we might, depending on our personality types, that we might, some of us might have lots of friends and some of us are quite selective and only have 1 or 2. Ultimately, as human beings, we need to connect and we need to belong. If we don't feel those 2, mentally, we're not going to be healthy. So in this stage, it says you feel safe to be yourself and you're accepted for who you are. So it's almost like if you think of induction and orientation of an organization, when you all think back to when you all started in your companies, you probably had different experiences. Some of you had an amazing experience where you probably had a lovely detailed induction program that you spent a month doing before you actually started doing your job, where others of you probably walked in and the company forgot that you were coming and there was no desk or no laptop or no induction whatsoever, and you just had to start working. So the difference in those 2 is if people are prepared for you, you feel welcomed, and the science behind it says clearly that we tend to stay much longer in an organization where we feel that we belong and that you can be yourself. So as it says there at the end, they're bringing your unique attributes and defining characteristics to the team. So that's inclusion. If we cut out all the complexity in that, I've summarized it. Can I be my authentic self? So that's the first thing you need to ask yourself in your environment, in your workplace, and in the team that maybe you're running. Are you being yourself or are you being somebody else in that space? So there's the first aha. The second one is learner safety. And I enjoy learner safety because that's my background, learning and development. But it really is about learning and growing. Am I in a space where I'm allowed to play around and learn and grow? It says here in this stage, you feel safe to exchange learning process by asking questions, giving and receiving feedback, experimentation. And the last one, making mistakes. That's how we learn psychologically as adults and as children. So children make mistakes, that's how they learn. And human beings make mistakes, that's how we learn. So it doesn't shift. We should be allowed to, always within reason, to do exactly the same as an adult. If we're receiving feedback from our line manager, we should be able to give feedback. If you are a line manager, you just can't give feedback and not want your team to tell you anything, because there's a little alarm bell, a red flag, perhaps waving to say, why is no one giving me feedback? Potentially, it leads to a lack of psychological safety. People don't know how to approach you, don't know how to talk to you. To simplify it, can I grow? Can I grow in my space? Am I allowing my team to grow? The third stage is contributory safety, which is, it satisfies what they call this need to make a difference. So can I bring my value, my skill set, my learning, my experience, my background, and can I contribute? If I'm not feeling like I can contribute, then there's going to be a lack of psychological safety. So if you're sitting in a meeting and everybody's saying something and you don't know what to say or to contribute, it makes us feel less than. It goes back to our vulnerability of feeling that we're not effective. This is where imposter syndrome pops up, because I'm not contributing. So always a very, very helpful advice I was given as a leader. If you are leading a meeting, you've got a mixed bag of people in that meeting. You've got people who talk, people who contribute, and people who keep quiet. Just because the person who is not speaking is not contributing does not mean they haven't got something valuable to say. So you as a leader have to learn to hook those people in. So you let the big mouths and those that have lots to say and those big personalities contribute. And when they're finished, you then call in the person that's not contributing and you ask them directly, is there anything else you want to add? I'm sure there's something. I know that this is an area that you are comfortable with, and they're not going to participate unless you hook them in. So it's very helpful to remember that everybody has something to say in that meeting, not just those that speak up. Some need a little bit of a nudge and a little bit of encouragement. And the summarized version is, can I create value? Question mark. And then the last stage, fortunately the only 4, is challenger safety. So challenger safety satisfies this need to make things better. Okay, it's the whole status quo story. How many of you have been told in the world of work, this is the way you've always done it, so don't change it. If it's not broken, don't change it. So this is where innovation and thinking differently is so vitally important. And if you're not allowing people in your team, or you are not being allowed to challenge the status quo, red flag. It's uncomfortable, it's messy, it's challenging, because especially if we've implemented a system or process or policy and there's been costs involved, and then someone wants to change it, or we have designed this most amazing program or initiative. And for me, if I use the example of me in learning and development, I've created a leadership development program and I've been running it for 2 years. And then somebody comes along and says, we need to update this. You haven't spoken about new concepts like psychological safety. I have to challenge myself, because I don't want to change this amazing program because it's been running successfully, but it can't last forever. It has to be renovated. And I like that word, renovation. It's the same as organizational cultures. We always have to renovate and relook at. We need a fresh coat of paint. We need to change the curtains or the pillows. We don't have to demolish the house. We need to just relook at what's working, or adapting our style, or adapting the trends or the fashions. And if we set in stone and we refuse to budge, that makes us completely stagnant, ultimately irrelevant at the end of the day. So those are the 4 stages. And this is the simplified version of the challenger stage, is, can I be candid about the change? Can I actually question it? Can I be direct and give my viewpoint without being told things like, that's the way we do it around here. This is our culture. We don't change something that's not broken. And I'd love to, before we move on, I'd love to get some insights from you as to these stages, and which ones potentially stand out, because you may not have experienced all of them, and which ones do you think are maybe important to you, and if you've got any questions around these 4 stages, you can pop it in the chat, or you can put up your hand, and you can be bold and brave and unmute, and I can hook you in like that example, because you've got wisdom, you've got wise things to say. So please, if you want to speak, we will make this place psychologically safe so that you can speak up. Otherwise, just pop it in. Thank you, Rulani. Stages 2 and 4. Because to be realistic, some are going to be more important to you than others, or you may actually be experiencing the lack of some. Do you feel these stages are linear or standalone? That is a good question. It can be either or, because you don't have to. They don't have to all be there. They don't all have to be. It could be part of your culture in an organization, or you personally just might be more attached to one or the other. So either or. And they can be interconnected and intertwined as well. life is messy. It's not, unfortunately, it's not clear and precise. Right, let us move on. So here's a quote. So Tim Clark. So we've come across Amy Edmondson. She is one of the influence on this topic, and Tim Clark is another. And I liked his definition. This isn't a nice cultural addition or office perk. It's a negotiable part of any, sorry, a non-negotiable part of any functioning and flourishing organization. So it's not a nice to have and a wishy-washy feeling focused concept. It's backed by science, as we're going to discover shortly. Those of you who are in finance, there's a very favorable cost component if you run an organization that's psychologically safe. So what does psychological safety sound like? Okay, so now we're tapping into our heart, people. And this is also a very interesting slide. So this is the language that you should be hearing from your line manager, from your partner, from your colleagues. And this is the language you should be using when you are engaging with your team. How can I help you? What do you think? Your work matters. I trust you and our team. I appreciate your commitment. Thank you for working hard. I was wrong. I'm sorry. And Amy mentioned that in her clip. Your career path is my priority. Do you have the tools to succeed? These are really helpful questions, and I encourage you to practice them. And to challenge these when they are not occurring. There's much research done on KPAs and KPIs versus that last point there, my development or my career path. So before we should even tackle KPIs and KPAs in organization, which are both terms that are becoming quite old-fashioned very quickly, we should be spending more time engaging with our team and understanding what their needs are and how I as a leader can help and support and grow them. So as a leader of a team, what we should be doing once a week is saying, what's the plan this week? How can I help you? Full stop. Imagine that. Tapping into your line manager once a week. What's the plan for the week? Is there anything I need to do in order to support you to achieve your goals? Okay, that will also help you around not becoming a micromanager and allowing your team to be empowered. It's a very important word we need to practice regularly. Are you empowering people? Are you enabling people? Are you micromanaging people? If you micromanage, you can't empower an individual. If you don't delegate, you can't empower another individual. So there's such a link to leadership, as you can see, around psychological safety. A psychological environment that's not safe does not allow delegation, does not allow empowerment. It allows micromanagement, and it allows people to believe that only they are right. Let me just check the chats. We face these challenges in equity meetings. Staff are sometimes scared to voice their opinions in front of management. Absolutely. There's a prime example. I have seen horrendous examples of equity meetings being thrown together with individuals and not empowering people. And it's such a critical initiative to have in an organization. So the work that needs to be done there is actually upskilling and empowering people to speak and creating a safe environment. As you said, often people who don't have titles or influence feel very intimidated when they are now sitting with senior management team in a meeting. Absolutely, Rulani. In an environment where bullying is the order of the day, it's very difficult not to have an imposter syndrome. Exactly. So these are the difficult decisions we need to make in life. So we work for a team or an organization, and it's toxic, it's hostile, it's bullying. We have to make a choice. We challenge the system, and if we can't influence or challenge the system for our own self-worth and our self-being, we have to maybe actually say goodbye. The challenge we have in this day and age is obviously very high unemployment and job availability. But if our self-worth and mental health is being annihilated because we have a bully, and the term we use now in business is a narcissist or a psychopath leader who's going to be bullying you, that's very, very unhealthy. There are mechanisms in organizations to follow. There's grievance procedures, there's disciplinary codes. I challenge all of you, if you find yourself in a situation like that, is you've got to find someone that you trust to speak to. You need to follow the company's grievance procedure if it's become serious, but always have a conversation. That's what I always suggest. The first thing you need to do is go and have a conversation with a human being that may be the one causing this, because that's the power of connectivity. Often what psychologists will say, if you're having a face-to-face with somebody, it can actually completely shift the relationship. Even if the person has been awful to you or they are a bully, it's very difficult to carry on bullying when someone comes directly to you and speaks directly to you. I can't guarantee that it's going to work, but that should be the very first port of call. Give the person the opportunity. They may not even be aware that they are creating a toxic environment, but you may be the person that has to plant the seed. Okay, if that makes sense. Right, so I've got another clip for you.
That means is leaders create an environment in which the people working in the company, the people on a team, feel safe enough to raise their hand and say, I made a mistake, or I don't understand what I'm doing, or I'm struggling at home and it's affecting my work, or I'm scared, or I need help, without any fear of humiliation or retribution. In fact, they can say these things with absolute confidence that their boss or their coworkers will rush to support them. That's what a trusting team feels like. We've all been on one before. We also all know what it feels like not to be on a trusting team, where we would never admit mistakes for fear of humiliation or getting in trouble. We're never going to say, I don't understand something. We're not going to admit we're scared. We're not going to tell anybody that we're struggling at home, it's affecting our work. And we're definitely not asking for help, because these things make us vulnerable or weak and might put us on a short list for the next round of layoffs. Or worse, my boss, it might hurt my career chances. I won't get promoted because I've said I don't understand something. So we keep quiet. It might work in the short term, but over the course of time, a company where no employee ever admits mistakes, or worse, they hide their mistakes, eventually those cracks grow and grow and grow and cause great damage to the organization and its ability to succeed. So this is a leader's responsibility. It's a leader's responsibility to create an environment in which people feel psychologically safe, and if somebody makes a mistake, we can help them fix it. As Alan Mulally used to talk about when he took over Ford Motor Company, you are not the problem, you have a problem. And if you can tell me the problem, we can all rally together to help you fix it.
Cool. Great insights there from Simon. And once again, I think his understanding of what psychological safety is, and I'm sure also most of you have come across Simon before. He says it as it is. He's not afraid to challenge the status quo, and he really has a fundamental belief in employees challenging the system. And I'm sure most of you are very aware what COVID also highlighted is that as employees are demanding far much more from their employers. So you are potentially all employees too. So the organizations that we work for, we're not prepared to just accept potentially stuff that we did in the past. There's so much awareness. There's so many amazing influencers like the two that we've seen this morning that speak up. There's no leadership development course, effective course in the world that doesn't touch on psychological safety. So it's not about that people are not aware of this, it's that they're not practicing it, or they're in complete denial that they actually are responsible for psychological safety. So I just want to check the chats. Okay, we've got a very interesting code of good practice. Psychological safety features very strongly as a coping mechanism, lack of as a reason for psych harassment, and also lack of reason for reporting. It also reflects in the struggle of finding participants. Psychological safety, unfortunately, still seems to be a luxury. Absolutely agree. So it's a word still, it's not being practiced. And I think it's all of our responsibility as is diversity and inclusion, where things are not as they should be. We need to challenge, and it's risky because sometimes that may result in us being disciplined. It may result in us having to leave, or it actually could result in us shifting an entire system. Remember, it just takes one person to start a movement and people will join you. We think we're alone. We think we're the only ones, like imposter syndrome, going through something. You are not. If you're feeling that earlier example of a toxic environment or bullying environment, if you're feeling bullied, trust me, there are plenty of other people feeling exactly the same. It's you've got to track each other down, and you've got to raise it, and you've got to follow the correct channels in order to question it. Right, so let's see what it looks like. So we've seen what it sounds like. So what does it look like? So this is the environment that we want to have. So when you're seeing these things, then we are potentially on the right track. And remember, what can happen that you can have micro versions of good or bad in an environment. So in a big corporation, it may be the company's philosophy, but you have certain teams that are not following it and certain teams that are following it. So giving and receiving feedback, raising issues and concerns, you're able to disagree. You can ask for clarification. You can ask for difficult questions. You can ask for help. You can offer solutions to problems. And there we go. And all of those speakers that we've seen today have spoken about this: admit errors instead of hiding errors. When we all make mistakes. We are human beings. We're going to stuff up. We're going to make mistakes. And the answer, the key to that is, does the environment allow us to do that? And if we do it, we must obviously fix it. We must obviously correct it, and not try and blame others, because the blame game is a clear indicator. Once again, we want to blame other areas of the business. We want to blame other departments instead of going, right, we need to work together to find a solution. So I hope this slide makes a lot of sense. This is what you want to create. When you've got this, then you're on the right track. And Dr. Zeus always manages to slip into many of my trainings, simply because I love these lessons, because it ties in so beautifully with what we've spoken about, and also to remind us why we're important, and also to help us not to fall in the imposter syndrome trap. Today, you are you. That is truer than true. There's no one alive who is youer than you. Why fit in when you're born to stand out? I've used that mantra many times in my career. Embrace that, own it. People are going to try and suppress you, crush you, make you align to them, but you are born to stand out. Remember that. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in any direction you choose. Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Today I shall behave as if it is the day I will be remembered. So just a little fun element, but the beauty of the content is it's obviously very relevant. Right. So the benefits, naturally. So we need to convince businesses and leaders why it's important. Pretty obvious. Hopefully I'm talking to the converted. If you create a space where people can be themselves, they can make mistakes, they can share, they can give feedback, you're going to have better levels of communication, more openness and learning, improved performance with more creativity and innovation. Huge research around this one. This is when you don't have psychological safety, nobody is going to innovate and be creative. Positive employee attitudes, so your culture surveys, your engagement, you want to be part of. If my organization shows me that they care and will grow me, I will give, I will contribute. If I sense you're not going to grow me and you're not going to care about me, why would I give anything? I'll just do the bare minimum. And I'm sure you come across the on-trend term, quiet quitting, where people disengage because there's no psychological safety. Increased levels of initiative, such as identifying ways to work around processes that impact performance. So it's looking for new ways of doing stuff. A fearless organization, which is also a lot of work that Amy Edmondson is doing, which is a whole topic in itself, which leads a psychological safe space will lead to a fearless organization. So, I mean, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but you will have access to the slides. But it's a lovely way of just depicting. It's a lovely slide to share with your team, for you to put up on a notice board, in management meetings, to question yourself. It's almost a self-audit. Am I creating a space with my team that's allowing this? Is our organization, if you happen to be overseeing an entire organization, here's your cheat sheet. And it really is a cheat sheet. It's not a simplistic version. It's looking at all elements that are going to drive your organization to be more inclusive, more effective, and ultimately the byproduct is you're going to make money at the end of the day. So it really is, as a leader, your role as a colleague, as a partner, as a parent, as a friend. We want to create spaces where others can shine. It's not about me. It's about others around me. So if you have a team, if you lead people, I'm sure you realize we're completely specialists in that we have our own skill sets and our strengths. We can't be everything. So if we can't be everything, and what Richard Branson has always said, he hires his weaknesses. So you've got to surround yourself by people who have skill sets that are different to yours, not the same, because then you're just creating clones. Recruitment, the error they make in recruitment constantly is that you are creating your clones instead of creating people that are completely different to you that offer something different. So I enjoyed this. I came across this when I was doing my research on this topic. As we end off here, it's really about please take responsibility for your energy you bring into the space. So when you enter a room, when you're walking into a meeting, when you're walking into your building every day, you actually have a choice to how you're going to show up. And to me, it's very simple. It's exceptionally, exceptionally powerful. So that's why I love this. It said your words matter, your behaviors matter, our patients and our teams matter. Take a slow, deep breath. Make sure your energy is in check before entering. And if it's not, do exactly what it says. Go back, splash your face, go and hug a tree, go and scream into I was going to say your pillow, but you're not going to have a pillow at work. Get rid of that tension and show up how you want to show up in the workplace. Cool. Thank you, everybody. So that was a very high level introduction to psychological safety. And if you've got any, I know we have reached our time, but I will hang around. Those of you who need to drop off, which meaning hopefully you have a psychological safe workspace that's going to allow you to spend a few more minutes engaging. But if you don't, or if you've got something you need to get to, please, you are certainly welcome to leave. But if you've got any questions on this topic, please fire away, or even put up your hand and we can unmute as I just look through. Pleasure, everybody. One receives negative feedback, it dents your confidence. I guess even if your inputs are not adequate enough, it excuse me, it's how feedback is provided. Absolutely. It must be, and that's a very good point there, because feedback must be valid, it must be meaningful, it must have an outcome. So if you're giving me feedback about work that I haven't done, and you need to tell me why and how I can improve it, or ask me, rather than just saying, no, that's not acceptable. So we too often too light on our feedback that we give people. And if someone gives you feedback and it's too light, you need to then ask, you need to say, so tell me, what were you thinking? What can I possibly improve? Thank you, everybody. Great subject matter. Thank you for all contributing. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat, or pop them in the Rulani, you had a question earlier. Can one identify the imposter syndrome on others rather than only from my own perspective? Good question. Ask others if you're picking up something, sensing something, raise it. Don't just make assumptions. Raise the topic. Talk to colleagues. Talk to friends, because that's what will surprise you. How many people are actually in the same boat? Any more questions? Please fire away. Yes, the presentation will be available. We'll send it out to all of you. Caroline. Pleasure, everybody. Thank you. Pleasure. Right, if there are no more questions, then I'm going to send you on your way to spread the love, to challenge the system, and to make the world a better place. Hopefully I will see you next time. Cheers, everybody.